Hi friends, Rosh here with the denomination. I am one of your Director of Advancements, and I'm sitting down with Daniel Hussey, who is going to share with us about capital campaigns in the context of churches. Daniel, thanks for coming in today. We're really excited for this conversation. A lot of churches have been asking.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. My name's Dan Hussey. I'm the campaign consultant at Hussey Philanthropic.
Daniel, what is different about capital campaign fundraising than what the average person would think of when they think of just fundraising? What makes it different?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So capital campaign fundraising is more about the vision. It's more about the future. It's more kind of what's ahead of us. And so what's unique about it is it's not simply taking what you're doing, maybe it's the church bake sale or the car wash or event-based fundraising and making it bigger. It's actually a unique step of process and elements that allow you to raise significant funds for a more transformational project. So it's not something that you would do annually, year over year. It's not cyclical like annual fundraising. It's more kind of, you can do consecutive campaigns, but it's more about how do we take a big step forward in our vision, our mission, and achieve something that's really important for the trajectory of our either congregation or one of the charities that we're trying to support.
For a church that has no background in capital campaigns, the idea itself is daunting.
Yes.
What would be like phases of a capital campaign that they need to even just strategically be aware of before they walk into such a decision?
Yes. So I love that you stated it that way. There are phases to a capital campaign.
Yeah.
It's not sort of what we would call a binary decision, meaning yes or no. You want to sort of look at this as a phased approach because often the answers that you're looking for, how much can we raise, when would we need to get this done by, you actually don't have the answers to those questions in the beginning. So it's very difficult for you to say we're going to do a capital campaign or we're not going to do a capital campaign because you're often missing the answers that you need to those questions.
Yeah.
And the only way to find those answers is to start. So there's typically 6 phases in a capital campaign.
Okay.
The first phase is campaign strategy and project vision. This is all about seeking internal clarity before we get external validation. So we as a leadership group, and it doesn't have to be the whole congregation at this moment, but we as a leadership group need to get very clear about what is the project.
Okay.
What's the problem we're trying to solve, and why is this project the right solution? Once we've got validation from a small handful of people, and we usually call that step community conversations. We want to have a handful of conversations. We don't need to talk to everybody. We don't need to, sample the entire congregation. But we do want to have a group of people saying, you know what, I'm excited about this. If we're going to raise money for this, I'm behind it.
Okay.
After we've got validation of the vision, we want to move into campaign planning. We're going to need a story, which is a case for support.
Yeah.
We're going to need to think about the project. How long does it run? How much money do we need? We're going to need to think about pledge period. How long do people have to give? We want to think about treasury process, meaning, okay, how are we going to segregate and separate these funds so that they're designated for the actual capital project?
Right.
So there's a lot of preparatory planning work that we want to get right before we start actually raising money. And then there's the quiet phase.
Oh.
So the quiet phase is if you've ever seen a thermometer on the side of a building, a church, or a hospital, that they're actually through the quiet phase most often.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot of value in making noise or making publicity around the campaign. The campaign is how you're raising money. So in the quiet phase, we're talking a lot about the project, a lot about the vision, but then we're welcoming people into individual conversation about how they can financially support it.
Okay.
And so that's the quiet phase. Once we get through the quiet phase, usually about 70 to 85% of dollars raised, then we can make noise about the capital campaign. Then we want everybody in the community or in the congregation to be supporting the capital campaign.
Right.
The nuance there is, again, there's not a lot of value in going public around the campaign itself. There is value in making noise about the project and the vision, and then inviting people into conversation. The last and final phase, once we get through that public component, is sort of campaign completion.
Okay.
So you've got a lot of promises or pledges to give.
Yeah.
We need to collect on those pledges. You've also got probably donor recognition. If that's something that you've promised to do or it aligns with the values of your organization, we've got to fulfill that promise. We also need to think about what's next. Doesn't mean the next campaign. It doesn't mean you have to do something big like this, but we have to give people either close that story loop. Okay, we achieved what we set out to do, and show them the impact of their donation. Where'd my money go and how's it making a difference? And we also want to sort of set the trajectory of where are we going together now. This is a very relationship-based activity. And so one of my least favorite terms is a campaign donor. Somebody that only supported the campaign and they're not supporting the organization in that annual fundraising. Because we do go back to annual fundraising. We do, often campaigns are doing capital and annual at the same time. They're running those things in parallel.
Right.
And so now that you've built a new building or you've renovated the church, there's a need for people to continue to sustain the annual fundraising of that building.
Yeah. I think one of the tensions that maybe councils or even congregants go into with the capital campaign is that they have to, let's say you're fundraising for $1 million, you have to do that while still meeting your annual operational expenses. Then there's this other component of, what if people pledge, but then they don't give? So I think sometimes for people who don't have that background in fundraising might struggle to trust the process.
Yeah.
And with a capital campaign, it feels like more is at stake, right? Because
there definitely is more at stake. But there's a few factors, or there's a few elements to your question. The one element that I'll address kind of head on is pledge redemption.
Okay.
Pledge redemption is all about a promise. And there are two parts to a promise. It's what we promised as sort of the visionary or the project, and it's also the promise of the donor. And so when we're having stewardship conversations, when we're showing people this is where your money's going to go and this is how it's going to make a difference, I often think about fundraising as investments. When people make an investment, they actually don't want you to lean out. They want you to lean in with communication. They don't want you to ask for more, but they want you to show them that we're making progress on our vision.
Okay.
And so anytime that we pull away, people start to get worried. Well, is the new church being built? Are we doing it? I don't see any evidence, or I don't see any progress. That's where we start to see people pull away from their pledges, because they have not been given the evidence that we're making progress.
Right.
So that's a key aspect of once somebody pledges to give, it's not over. It now moves into stewardship. And we want to bring some leadership energy into that stewardship, meaning that we're showing them where their gift went, where the money went. Even if the hole in the ground hasn't been dug, we need to show progress. Either progress and, hey, we hit a financial fundraising milestone, or we hit a project milestone. Hey, we got the renderings for the new church. I'd love to show you those.
Right.
That's the kind of stewardship that ensures that pledges are redeemed. So it's all about relationship and communication and showing people that there's evidence that we're making progress.
What are some of the reasons why capital campaigns would benefit from having an external support guiding that process? What are maybe the pros or the cons?
Yeah, great
to
question. Great
churches
question.
coming in from either angle?
Yeah. So what's unique about capital campaigns is most organizations haven't done them before.
Okay.
And so when you're looking at whether you should bring on a capital campaign consultant, you want somebody who is truly a specialist. You're not looking for a generalist.
Okay.
You're looking for somebody that knows exactly how to execute a capital campaign and has demonstrated the ability not to just do it once, but do it multiple times. We want repeatable success here.
Okay, yeah.
The other thing that's important to figure out whether you need a capital campaign consultant or not is to understand where are your gaps. What are you missing as a team?
Okay.
If you've done this before, then maybe you don't need a capital camp consultant, because you have the experience in doing it. But if this is the first time that anybody around the table has even sort of considered this idea, we would encourage you to seek somebody out who can act as your guide. They can act as your guide through this process that isn't terribly complex, but is likely very unknown to you. And it's not simply doing more of what you do on an annual basis. There are unique steps and processes we went through at the high level, but there's a million little steps underneath it. There's also sort of what we described or what we've identified through our practice in supporting charities in capital campaigns is there's 7 elements that we really pay attention to. And so when we think about campaign readiness, we're evaluating against those 7 elements.
Okay.
And we're trying to figure out, okay, we know these are the keys to success. How do we know where you're strong and where you're weak? And it's something that we're constantly monitoring and trying to elevate to the highest level possible throughout a capital campaign. And that just comes with experience. There's no other way. And so when you bring on a consultant, they should ideally have a methodology. They should have a process to get you the successful outcome. And they should have evidence that they are able to deliver repeatable success for your organization.
Right. Personally, I've been involved in 3 capital campaigns. 2 were for large purchases of buildings, and 1 was for a capital truck purchase. And it was really interesting that a lot of the donors the major donors who were interested in the building purchases, they would come in and say, we'll give $50,000 if you can have this much, this much, and this much by... So there were conditions around some of those major gifts. Is that normal practice in capital campaign fundraising, or that's just...
No, I wouldn't say it is abnormal. I think what I would try to do with it is understand the psychology of the donor. What are they trying to achieve through those milestones, right? Or those conditions.
Right.
And what they're trying to achieve is a few-fold. One is nobody likes to be alone.
Okay.
They're looking for others in the community to step alongside them and be a part of this journey. Anytime that we're alone, there's a fear there, right? Am I the only one that's doing this? Like, am I crazy? Like, what's happening? And so they're looking for community. They're looking for evidence that there are others with me in this journey. And so that's one of the keys when we move into that stewardship phase with a donor, is to give them the evidence that we're making progress. They're not alone in this. So it's the more that we can lean into that and share with them, you're not by yourself. We have other major donors. We're making progress. The less likely that those conditions will stay. They might start to remove those conditions because you've given them the evidence that there are others with them on this journey.
Daniel, how would a church know that they're ready to begin the journey with you? You touched on their kind of 7 points. What would those be so that they can really figure out if, should we even start this yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the 7 factors that we look at are transformational vision. What's the problem that we're seeking to solve? What's the solution? How do we know it's the right solution? And what is the impact of that solution? So as simply, we need a new building. That's not going to resonate with a donor. They're going to want to understand, well, why do we need a new building? What is it that is currently getting in the way of us achieving our vision or our mission as a congregation with our current building? And how do we know a new building is going to solve that problem? We then want to think about leadership. If there are more people around the table that are putting effort behind this and are actually leaning into this process, the easier it gets. The more that we can work as a collective, the easier this gets. And we all bring different skills to that journey. Part of that, we also talk about infrastructure. What are the tools that you have within your congregation that you can use? Do you have a donor database? Can you process donations? Can you say thank you? Do we have the infrastructure to actually pull this off? We also want to look at track record and authority. Is there evidence, is there proof that we as a congregation have done anything like this before? And so even if you haven't built a brand new church or renovated before, can we at least come to that leadership component and add people around the table who have done something similar? We also think about the actual story. What is the story that we're telling? When I sit in front of a donor, what's the story? What am I asking them to be a part of? What am I asking them to join? Because if we want 6-figure gifts, we need to give 6-figure effort. And so we need actually to sit with somebody and say, this is what I'm asking you to be a part of. There's also, if we're asking people for big gifts, we need to give them something that they can sit with and make a decision around. Whether they're the sole decision maker or this is a family decision, a business partner decision, there's likely somebody that they need to sit with and say, I met with the congregation's leadership. This is what they told me. I think we should do it, and here's why. Okay. So they're kind of retelling the story in their own words, and we want to give them something, often a case for support, where they can sit with that decision. We also need to identify donors. So we need to research and identify donors. Who would be a good donor to be a part of this? Who's interested in the vision, but also has the financial capacity to lead. The second last component that we look at is actually the visit, is just sitting with people and having conversation. We want to design that visit so that people feel comfortable. And then the final thing that we actually want to look at is stewardship. When somebody gives to us, how do we actually take care of the gift? How do we show them that we're making progress? Yeah. Even if the building won't be open for 3 years, how do we show them that we're actually making progress through the project and the campaign? Right. So those are the things that we assess and we constantly monitor through a campaign, is we're looking at how ready are you in these 7 areas. So this is, again, isn't binary. You're not ready, you are ready. It's more of a continuum, meaning you could be more ready if we did the following things and we fixed the following areas. Then it's time to sort of continue to move through those phases of a capital campaign.
Now that is actually a nice lead to my next question, because I wonder, as a church journeys through those phases, from your experience, is there stall out periods like in because a capital campaign could go for years?
Yep.
So what happens when things stall?
Yeah, great question. So capital campaigns typically on average last about 3.5 years. So this isn't a one and done, we're not getting this done in a year. Yeah. It's usually a multi-year process. Actually, the first million or couple million is actually the easiest. Okay. It's not the hardest, because you're sitting with people that you're probably the closest with. When we think about donor research, we think about A, B, C. They have the ability to give, they believe in the cause, and we have a connection to them. Okay. So you're usually at the highest or the most optimal level of the ABCs. The people that you're raising money from or with in the beginning of a capital campaign are the ones that you're the closest to. Once we've gone through those conversations in a capital campaign, it's very natural to make new friends. We've got to welcome new people into the vision. And so that's where things start to get a little bit harder. And so that's where we do see things stall a little bit. The other place that we see things stall at is when the project actually starts to kick off, because we've added another component to, the leadership needs to manage. So we've got day-to-day operations, we've got finance, we've got campaign, and now we've got project. So the attention starts to get divided. There's a leadership group that needs to be paying attention to the build, and they start to get distracted from the campaign itself. And that's where the campaign starts to slow, and then everybody notices, hey, there's not as much money coming in anymore. Yeah. What's going on? Well, we got distracted by the actual project. Okay. And it doesn't mean the project's not important, but we have to start to think about, do we need to add more people to the team? Okay. So when a campaign gets stuck, we come back to those 7 criteria. And usually one of those 7 criteria, or multiple of them, is not operating properly. It's not abnormal. It's difficult, because once you've got something stuck, you need the inertia to get it unstuck. So it does require more energy and effort to get a campaign unstuck than it is to keep a campaign going. Okay.
This is a question that people would be uncomfortable to ask a consultant.
Fire away. I love it.
For everybody.
Yeah, please do.
When you're looking at a project that's 3 to 5 years, people get nervous to work with a consultant because of the fees associated with that. Yeah. What is the industry norm in this space? Do consultants usually work on retainer basis, or is it more of an industry norm for them to say, we'll work on like a project type base and we'll give you a price for a capital campaign? How does the whole consulting industry practice work on average?
It's a really good question. So maybe we'll go one level higher up. you should set aside usually about 10% of your capital campaign budget for campaign expenses.
Okay.
Those shouldn't be only consulting. There's
Okay.
other things, case for support development, allocating people's time, if it's paid staff time, to the campaign so that they can focus on it. So your campaign budget should typically be 10%. That's just a rough kind of napkin math. As your campaign gets bigger, that percentage should go down, right? If you're doing $100 million, it shouldn't be 10%.
Right.
It should shrink.
Right.
So when you think about working with a consultant, the way that we prefer to work is we like to start the relationship small. And so when you think about campaign readiness, we like to do that as a single project.
Okay.
So that we can understand what are you like and you can understand what are we like. Again, using the mountain climbing analogy, you want to make sure that you've got the right guide, and we want to make sure we're not dragging anybody up the mountain. And so we would encourage people to explore working with a consultant or a firm is look for a test project. Look for something that you can figure out, is this a good fit for us? Then when you move into actually running the campaign, I would encourage you to understand, what do you think you need to be successful? Where do you, through that readiness, where do you think you need help? Where do you think you're weak? Where do you think you would benefit? And understanding, what kind of consultant do you want? Do you want DIY? Here's the roadmap. You run with it. Do you want done with you? We'll coach you through this. We'll support you, but you're going to need to do some work. We'll do some work.
Okay.
Or do you want done for you? Meaning we'll run the whole campaign. We'll produce everything.
And you don't have to
you don't have to
execute.
do anything.
Right.
We wouldn't encourage, just on that last part, we would encourage you to sit with your donors, though. I would never encourage somebody to outsource that.
Okay.
Because if you outsource that, you've outsourced the relationship. Right. And that means when that consultant or that person goes, so goes the relationship.
Yeah.
And so we would always encourage you to not outsource that part, and you be the owner of that relationship. So there's many different ways to do it. There's some consulting firms that'll do project-based, there's some that will do retainer. The other thing that we would caution you is if somebody's approaching you to do a percentage of dollars raised, that is not in alignment with the Association of Fundraising Professionals. So if somebody puts forward a proposal to say, well, if you raise 10 million, we'll take 2%, I would be very cautious about that kind of relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of us, we've never interacted
You don't know.
in these spaces with external people, and it's good to kind of have a baseline understanding as well. So Daniel, for a church who might be considering starting this journey, because it really is a journey, what should they do?
That's a really good question. So there's kind of two things that I would recommend. The first is we have a resource that describes those 6 phases in much more detail. And so I would encourage anybody that's at least considering a capital campaign to educate themselves on how does the campaign actually work, what are the keys to success, and what is the point of each of those phases, and start to try to identify where are we in that phased approach.
Yeah.
The second thing is we run a webinar every month that describes how does a capital campaign work, what are the keys to success, so a much more in-depth conversation than what we've done today.
Right. That's fantastic. So we are going to be linking those resources and Daniel's contact information for all of our churches if they want to explore this with you further. Daniel, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us with such generosity.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to share about capital campaigns.